So welcome. This is the EQFIT Smart Selling course. This is the introduction. I'll tell you all about EQFIT. I'll tell you about what's in this course, which is the initial course in the series. And we'll walk through what does it mean to be an EQFIT salesperson or sales manager or sales director. And bottom line, anybody who's in the business of influence is in sales, and that may be leadership. That's all going to be covered as we walk through this course together. This, as I've mentioned, is the introductory course, and I want to share with you some specifics about why EQFIT. The first thing we're going to look at is when you're in sales, you know, people make decisions on emotions and then they rationalize with logic. A lot of people would disagree with that, especially people out there selling AI-based sales enhancement software, and that's okay. Those are good tools. But selling will always come down to two people who are interacting with each other, two people that have their own sets of emotions, their own goals, their own agendas, their own desires. All of that comes into play in what we call the buyer-seller dynamic. So if we can just start with an understanding that buyers are going to buy on emotion, not on all the wonderful features and benefits, and we'll talk more about what that emotional sequence is as we get deeper into the course. If we can start there and understand we as salespeople, and I include myself in that group, we have our own set of emotions. We're navigating our own emotions as we're trying to navigate other people's emotions. Now, does that cut out the need for sales skills? Absolutely not. Sales skills are important. Sales experience is important. This experience thing is AQ, which is acquired intelligence. It is that intelligence that comes through experience and training, and then it connects with your IQ, which is your innate intelligence, what we have always heard, IQ, your intelligence quotient. So all of those different intelligences come together. But I can tell you from scientific research, from case study after case study, the most effective of all of those is going to be emotional intelligence, because emotions drive action. They drive decision making. So the question, why EQFIT Smart Selling? Well, it starts with first understanding how buying decisions are made. And if you think about purchases you've made in the past, I think you'll see that in yourself. Why did you buy the red one instead of the blue one? Why did you buy the one that was higher priced instead of the cheapest one? There are going to be emotional drivers involved in that. That's what we're going to leverage with the EQFIT Smart Selling process. Now, we call it a human behavior framework. That's what we're going to use to enhance sales success. How can we be more successful in selling by understanding how the human brain works, how buyers make decisions, how we as sellers are approaching buyers, and are we doing it in the right way? And that includes assessing where we are today and deciding where we want to go tomorrow, and how do we create a development pathway that helps us to get there. So I hope to answer this big question of why EQFIT as we go through the rest of this introduction. Let's look at the next steps here. As we introduce this EQFIT Smart Selling approach, it starts with a profile, a sales assessment, but it's not like any other sales assessment you've seen. And I'll talk a little bit more about that right now. Most sales assessments out there are based in personality. They're based in what we know to be kind of a DISC assessment: dominance, influence, steadiness, compliance. Well, the problem with sales assessments based in personality alone is that that's not a primary predictor of success. Personality is about preferences and styles. Are you more dominant? Are you more bottom line? Are you more about people and who's involved? Are you more about steadiness and pace and promise? Or are you more about compliance, rules, structure, organization? Well, as you can see, those are all important elements of who we are, and we all have some of each of those in us, but that's not a primary predictor of success in sales. Having a sales assessment that actually measures how you are showing up right now to influence other people, that is a huge advantage. And it's based in emotional intelligence, which is the most important skill set when it comes to influencing others. By the way, it's also the most predictive of success. 2 to 4 times greater predictive capabilities than IQ assessments. Something to think about. Here's the next step. We're going to explore the EQFIT Sales Profile for yourself. What does that look like? What is your EQFIT Sales Profile? What is your results in that profile? Why is that important? It's a real-time measure of how you're showing up to influence others based on 8 different success factors. More on that later. Next, we're going to look at sales styles, and there's those success factors I just talked about. What is a sales style? Well, it's how you tend to approach selling and influencing other people. Then we're going to start to come up with ideas on how to create a developmental roadmap so that you can build these skills in yourself. And I have read book after book of sales experts around the world. I've seen case studies. I've looked at research. I have my own research. I am the creator of the EQFIT Sales Profile. I have literally at this point thousands of EQFIT Sales Profiles that I can look at and see where is the most impactful area for a given type of sales, a given individual. Here's what we know in this entire process: emotional intelligence, that skill set, self-awareness, self-management, self-direction, and how to navigate emotions in ourselves and others is the most important in creating what Jeb Blount, the author of Sales EQ, calls the ultra high performer. Great book, by the way, if you get a chance to read it, or audiobook like me if you like to listen to him. That's Jeb Blount, and that's Sales EQ. So the last thing that we're going to do here, we're really going to demonstrate how the proprietary EQFIT approach gives you a competitive advantage. That is where we put application into place. This is not going to be just theory. It's not going to be just good information. It is going to be a step-by-step walk through the best ways to get the success that you want, leveraging this human behavior framework that we call EQFIT, leveraging and growing your skills in emotional intelligence in specifically the sales arena. So let's look at where we go from here. The first step is to assess. If you've been to our website, you've seen we have 4 steps: assess, equip, align, succeed. Everything starts with good data, good information, and that's assess. How do we measure how someone is showing up to influence others. We do it with the EQFIT Sales Profile. And as I've stated before, there's over 200 plus sales assessments in the marketplace today. This is an absolutely unique assessment that is based in emotional intelligence, what we know to be the most important skill set to success in sales. The rest of those assessments out there, and there are some very good ones, don't get me wrong on that. There's some good ones out there, but they're based in personality. They're based in competencies, things that may be important, but they're not the most important. Let me walk you through the genesis. Where did EQFIT come from? Well, I've been in sales more than 40 years. So I've got a lot of experience in sales and sales management. As I grew in my capabilities, in my experience level, just in the years of doing sales, it became apparent to me as I moved from straight sales into consulting and have spent the last 35 plus years using different tools of psychology, there was always something missing for me. Personality wasn't enough. Competence wasn't enough in specific skills. There was something missing. And what I realized is that because the buyer-seller dynamic is so focused on influencing others, meeting the emotional needs of the buyer, whether they will admit it or not. And I've sold to all kinds of people, engineers and owners and C-suite people, varieties of people that would swear up and down that emotions don't have any part in their buying decision. And I can just smile at that because I know that's not true. Emotional intelligence, that was the key for me. When I started to study, deeply study, brain science, neuroscience, and emotional intelligence about a decade ago, it became so crystal clear to me that this is the force multiplier, the magnifier of success for salespeople, if we can wrap our brains around it. And I looked and looked and looked to see if I could find anywhere where someone had created this type of sales assessment and sales approach based on emotional intelligence, and it flat doesn't exist. So I created it with the help of some very good people. Here's some backup, so to speak, to what I'm saying. Brian Tracy, probably one of the best known sales trainers around the world, basically in his book, The Psychology of Selling, what he says is if buying decisions are 100% emotional. To my knowledge, which is limited, of course, I don't think Brian Tracy is an expert in emotional intelligence. I don't think he has tons of different certifications, but this is someone who truly understands how to get to sales success, trained more than 500,000 salespeople around the world. And in his book, The Psychology of Selling, this is the quote. That says something. This is more confirmation that the EQFIT approach is not just valid, but very valuable. Here's another recent research outcome that I've seen. Behavioral economists, people who study the economy and study human behavior within the economy, are basically saying that buying decisions are 70% emotional and 30% rational. And that goes back to that people buy on emotion and rationalize with logic. So if all of these people are telling us how important it is for us to utilize the emotional component in the selling process, we probably should listen. I did. And that's where the EQFIT approach and the EQFIT assessment came from. So let's talk for a minute about these emotional drivers, because if you drill down far enough on any behavior or decision or action that someone takes, there are going to be emotional drivers, and they're going to play a large part in that decision, that behavior, or that action. This starts to explain a lot of the behavior that we see in people. Where is it coming from? It's coming from emotional drivers. So we have this knowledge now, this 30 plus years of emotional intelligence, the science of emotional intelligence, the research, the work that's been done. We have this huge body of data and evidence that is pointing towards how important emotions are in everything that we do, but specifically in sales. We know it has a huge impact, but a very small understanding of this, that needs to change. And that, I hope, is why you're here. I want to provide you a framework that you can customize for yourself to leverage this knowledge, this information, and your own experience, your own skills to create your own developmental pathway to get where you want to go. And frankly, if you want to become one of those ultra high performing salespeople, the key is emotional intelligence. You may have heard that from me already in this introduction, and I can't say it enough. It really changed the way I started selling when I had that epiphany, when I had that moment where the light bulb came on, and I thought, it's about what the buyer is feeling that is important. Because you know what that did for me? It gave me the opportunity to then speak to them in a way that they could engage with. Buyers can put up a defense very quickly, and you've seen it many times, and we do it ourselves. If the next salesperson looks like the last salesperson, and we fall into these patterns, and further on we'll talk about patterns in this course, then we have a pattern to respond to that. And usually it's defensive, and usually it's skeptical and not trusting. So how do we break through that with buyers? It's emotional intelligence. How do we change the dynamic? How do we flip the script in this situation? By the way, this is proven science. This is not theory. It's not some idea. It's not something I've made up. You can go Google emotional intelligence in sales and get tons of information. So let's move on and talk a little bit more about what we're going to focus on in this course, where things came from, and how we're going to bring that together. EQFIT was created when I partnered with the world's largest EQ community, which is called 6 Seconds. And their website is the number 6seconds.org. And you'll see that we're a preferred partner with 6 Seconds. They were instrumental in helping me bring my ideas and my innovations and creation to reality through their process and platform. And I am very thankful to them for that. I also built this on probably the most highly validated emotional intelligence assessment in the world. So that was a very nice outcome for me. Was the assessment was already validated. It was already measuring the things that we wanted to measure, but it had not yet been adapted for sales. And that's what EQFIT is. It's an adaptation of the most highly validated emotional intelligence assessment in the world into sales terminology and sales focus. It is a combination of neuroscience, sales experience, 30 plus renowned sales experts around the world who actually have come up with a set of success factors that they pretty much agree on. And that's what we built into the EQFIT approach and the EQFIT sales profile, what we call the success factors. The EQFIT approach, once we've done the profile, got the report, and we can see where you're showing up to influence others, how you're showing up to do that right now, and which of those 8 success factors you're using at different levels, then we talk about the approach. What is the approach? It starts with this real-time actionable data that we have that we call the EQFIT Sales Profile. And that there's some important words in there: real-time and actionable. It is truly a real-time measure of how you're showing up to influence other people. And it's actionable data. It's not just data that, okay, I know that, so what? It's data you can do something with. You can change things if you want, or you can leverage your strengths even greater if you want to. And a lot of that is a part of that customization of the human behavior framework that we've talked about. The next thing is the EQFIT mindset. If you've been in sales any time at all, you know what it's like to wake up one morning after a hard day the day before going, I don't think I really want to do this today. We've all been there. We've all felt that. But there is a way to create internal resources, a mindset that will give you more motivation, more optimism, some skills to better navigate your own emotions and the emotions of other people to help you move forward in a more productive way. Really, to give you the energy that you need. We will talk about energy throughout this course. And then there's the training. We're going to look at how to use this EQFIT approach, learn the different aspects of it. The beauty of this approach is it doesn't matter what other sales skill training you've had, this will work with it. This is a multiplier of success. It isn't a replacement for other things. It's an enhancement to what your experience is, to the training that you've been through. That's the beauty of the EQFIT approach. What is the EQFIT Advantage? Number one, as I just said, it works with any sales training. It doesn't matter what it is. Also, it leverages real brain science to enhance sales success. And we've talked about this idea of emotional drivers. If you can figure out what the emotional drivers are for the prospect or the buyer that you're talking to, you pretty much have most of the battle won, because you'll know how to communicate. You'll know what's important to them. You'll know what their buying decision pattern will be, because it's all going to be driven by their emotional drivers. The more we can understand that, the more we can identify those emotional drivers in buyers, the more effective we're going to be in our process. Also, and this is just as important, it removes roadblocks in ourselves, all those, what I call negative emotions, those detractors that keep us stuck. It helps to remove those. It helps us to face those things, basically name what they are, and then set them aside and choose something more productive with better outcomes. It also increases our opportunities. Have you ever been working throughout a day and it gets to mid-afternoon and you're just worn out? You don't have any more energy. You've exhausted yourself. Your energy is gone for the day. And you go, that's it. I'm done. I'm going home. What if you had a greater reserve of energy? What if you had more internal resources like optimism and motivation, internal motivation, that you could call on in that moment and make that one next call? What if that call turned out to be one of the biggest sales you've ever made? That happened to me. I forced myself, and I'm going to be honest about it. This was long before I knew much about emotional intelligence. I forced myself to make that next call. You know what that did for me? Number one, it proved to me that it was worth it. Number two, it built some internal resources in me because I took that next step. I went ahead and found enough motivation and energy. I made that next call, and I made one of the biggest sales of my life. That was when I was a young salesperson. And that was a lesson that I pull from even now. So that is basically the end of our introduction. Where we go from here is to identify what you want to do through this process.